Hey everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a 11 game Major League Baseball slate. This slate's pretty extensive today, so I do think there's some good plays on this one, but it's a little bit riskier slate than some of the other slates we've had lately. With that said, let's get into it. We do have a weather concern with the Atlanta Washington game. The Nationals tend to be kind of weird with weather, so I am a little concerned about it. That's really the only game that has a big concern though, so do keep that in mind. Let's go and get into the slate here. Oh, before I do, can you guys smash that like and subscribe button? Also, shout out to the YouTube members. Really do appreciate you guys. Make sure to comment below with your home run calls today and stuff like that. So let's go and get into the slate here. So we're going to get with Pablo Lopez here first from Minnesota. Teams that don't strike out a lot are his kryptonite, but he is facing a team today that will strike out a lot probably. And with Otani done, he should have a lot of opportunity to have a big game here. He's got really nice upside. He's been pretty solid throughout the season, and he has great metrics for this particular game. He also scored 22 fantasy points against the Angels earlier this year, so do keep that in mind. Then we'll look at Valdez for Houston. Now, his ceiling isn't as high as Lopez above, but he's a good contrarian option off of Lopez as he has a good matchup here. He does have nice upside, and his floor is a little bit lower, but he definitely has some potential to date, and he's had some really good games in a row recently. The strikeout rate, though, is a little bit inconsistent, but he typically doesn't need as many strikeouts to get a good score because he does have a tendency to get that win as well, and he goes pretty deep in the games usually. Then we'll look at Morton for the Braves here. Now, if this game plays, he'll be somebody that I'm very interested in. He has been somewhat inconsistent throughout the season, but Washington is a team that he can definitely score good amounts of points against. He has as much upside as anybody on the slate, though his floor is low. And this game is also away, which sometimes hurts him a little bit. But I still think he's a great option on the slate. Then we're going to look at Creamer for Baltimore. Now, he has some interesting upside today. His K rate has been inconsistent, and Cleveland doesn't strike out much, but he's capable of a 15 to 20 fantasy point game here. I think that's really in his range today, and he draws some really good metrics for this game, so I think he's a viable option here. Though I do think that there's a couple guys on Cleveland that are, capable on this one, but he is somebody that I would consider kind of as a contrarian option. And then we'll look at Gibson Long for Detroit. Now, he's only going to start his third game of the season, but he's had a pretty good start of his Major League Baseball career here. So he scored 18 and 28 fantasy points in his first two games. His K rate has been pretty good, and I don't expect him to go more than 5 or 6 innings though. But he's got a nice setup here to have a good third game in a row, and I think he's got a good opportunity here against Oakland. There's really not much on Oakland that I'm too fearful of today, as he has pitched very well so far. So let's go and get into our catchers here. So we're going to start with Kyle Ali for Seattle. I really do like his potential today. He's been somewhat inconsistent recently, but he's pretty much been the same all season long. He does have home run potential today. The metrics are off the charts. Now he did hit a home run in his last game, but he is capable of another big game here, and so I do like I do like him today as a good option. Sean Murphy is almost the same price, and he has been very inconsistent recently, kind of slumpy. But he does draw good metrics for this matchup against Patrick Corbin, and I do think he's a viable choice here. Though he doesn't play every day, obviously, he plays most days. Uh, if Darno doesn't play today, which I don't think he will, and Murphy plays, he'll be somebody to consider from a home run perspective, but he's high risk, high reward at this price. And then Jonah Heim for Texas is a great option today, as he's been pretty solid with 3 home runs over the last 10 games. His fantasy point per game is up, and in 6 games against Seattle, he's managed 10 fantasy points a game as well. He's had 2 really good games in a row. He does have multi-hit potential, and I do think he's a safer option than the top 2 guys I mentioned, but he is capable of a good game here. His floor is a little bit lower, though. Maybe in the first base, we'll look at Bryce Harper for Philly. Now, he has some good upside today, but he's been inconsistent recently with 3 home runs over the last 10 games, but only a 212 average. He does have multi-hit potential, but he does need to hit a home run to pay off at this price point. Then we'll look at Vaughn for Chicago White Sox. Now, I do think the White Sox are going to be a sneaky contrarian play today. He's hit the ball very well with the 300 average over the last 10 games, averaging about 7.5 fantasy points a game as well. He has good multi-hit potential, and he has some low-end home run upside against Chris Sale. Matt Olson, also in play for Atlanta. He's been about as good as anybody recently with 5 home runs over the last 10 games. He's got 53 home runs now. He's just trying to get as many as he can, I guess. He has multi-hit potential as well, but with this price point, he does have to hit that home run to really pay off. But he's capable of it. He's the best most home runs on the season in baseball. Nate Lowe also in play for Texas. He's been pretty solid throughout the season, but he's been kind of rough recently. Though he's had some good games where he's managed a couple good hit games and stuff like that. His price is about what I want it to be with a multi-hit potential. Though he has been striking out a little bit more recently than I would like, but he is a capable option on the slate. Maybe in the second base, we're going to start with Mookie Betts here. He can also play an outfield, but he's hit the ball pretty solid throughout the season, though he's been slumpy lately. Had some little injuries and stuff, which has seemed to slow him down a little bit. But he is capable of a big game and home runs, and if he can hit a home run today, he'll definitely pay off here. Now, Ozzy Albies is a core play for me. He's been over 10 fantasy points in 10 of the last 11 games. Absolutely crushing the ball, averaging over 14 fantasy points almost on that stretch. He's had 3 home runs in that stretch as well, and even managed a stolen base or 2. So he's been doing a little bit of everything, just hitting the ball very well. He's got great multi-hit potential. He had 4 hits yesterday, including a home run and a stolen base. But he's been really solid. Even if you remove that game, he's averaging over 10 fantasy points a game. So he's a great option here. He's kind of high risk, high reward, because if he hits a home run, that really helps him get where he wants to go. But he is a good option on the slate. Then we're going to look at Amed Rosario for the Dodgers. Now, he's been pretty solid recently, hitting 280. I've really liked him recently, a couple times at least, and he does draw good metrics today. He only scored 3 fantasy points yesterday, but he does have multi-hit potential, and he does have potential to do things on the base pass as well. And then Yon Moncada for the for the White Sox. He's been somewhat inconsistent throughout the year, but occasionally he has good metrics for a game, and he's been hitting the ball pretty well the last few games, so I think he's a viable option here. The White Sox are kind of a sneaky stack today, but high risk, high reward. Then we'll look at shortstop and look at Corey C. Whoopsie. I jumped over my third baseman. I'm sorry. I meant to go to Julian for Minnesota. I apologize about that. I just didn't see where I was on my sheet here. All right, so Julian looks like a really interesting option today at second base as well. He's kind of a contrarian play, but he's high risk, high reward, as he's had some good multi-hit games recently, and his price is still pretty cheap. He's a good second base option. Maybe in the third base, I did talk about Yon Moncada, so I leave him there, but Rafael Devers is also a core play here. He's hitting the ball very well with a 350 batting average over the last 10, and he's getting about 11 fantasy points a game. I do like his potential here with home runs as he's hitting them pretty well recently. And you like him whenever he gets in a role, and this is what he's kind of doing right now, so he's a great option here. Austin Riley also in play for Atlanta. If this game plays, he'll be a great option on the slate as he's hitting the ball very well. Though his fantasy point per game is a little bit down as he's not hitting a ton of home runs in that stretch, but he does have good multi-hit potential, though he does need to hit a home run really to pay off at this price point. And then we'll look at shortstop here now. We'll look at Corey Seager for Texas now. He's drawn some really good metrics on this slate. He is high risk, high reward, but he's hit the ball very well throughout the season. He's been a little bit slumpy recently, but he's gotten a couple hits in the last couple games, so I look for him to hit a home run today, and he has nice matchup metrics to do so. Tim Anderson, if you go with this White Sox stack, is definitely a sneaky play today, as he's hitting the ball very well for the last 10 games. He's not scoring a ton of fantasy points as a result, but he is hitting the ball well, and he is a viable option on the slate at a really cheap price. J.P. Crawford also in play for Seattle, as he has hit the ball up and down throughout the year, but he is hitting the ball pretty good right now. Not a huge home run threat, but a guy that can just get multi-hits and have good fantasy point games, and he's been doing that a lot recently. And then Amed Rosario can also play here at shortstop. Maybe the outfielders, we'll look at Acuna, who has been absolutely dominating throughout the season, and he's got home run and stolen base potential, which he managed a stolen base yesterday in a triple, even with just 1 hit. He doesn't strike out a ton, so that's nice as well, but he's obviously super expensive. If you go with that White Sox stack that I was talking about, you can go with Luis Robert Jr., as he's been really solid throughout the year with the home runs, but he's been inconsistent with the batting average. He has good upside here, and he's got home run metrics. He's pretty much boom or bust, though, so do keep that in mind, but the metrics are really in his favor today. Mookie Betts can also play here in the outfield. Then we'll look at Schwarber from Philly. Now, he's typically a boom or bust guy. His batting average is awful, but he's a home run or bust kind of guy. He does draw good metrics for a home run today, so he's a viable option, but he's high risk, high reward with his price being so high. Corbin Carroll, also a great option today for Arizona. He's hitting the ball very well with a 311 batting average over the last 10, including 10 fantasy points a game through that stretch. He's also got good multi-hit potential. He's a little bit cheaper than some of the other guys I've already mentioned. Then we'll look at Kalenic for Seattle. Now, he was very close to being a core play for me, as he's really hitting the ball pretty well, but he's just not a big home run guy. But he is manages to score some good multi-hit games lately, and so he does draw some good potential here. His upside is not quite as high as some of the other guys, which is why I kept him from being a core play. Yoshida was also considerable as a core play, though his batting average has been a little bit too weak recently, which is a little concern, but he does draw some home run metrics here and has some potential to have a big game. But he is high risk, high reward on the slate with his price beat a little bit high, but it's still lower than it has been. But he's a pretty good hitter. Then we'll look at Verdugo for Boston, also a good play today, though he's also not been very good lately. He's been slumpy. Boston's been kind of up and down throughout the year, and those two guys are typically the reasons that they go up and down. But he does draw the home run potential today, and I do think he has some good opportunity on this slate. And then Jimenez for the White Sox is last but not least. He's averaging about 7 fantasy points a game. He has some home run upside and multi-hit potential, and he's cheap enough that he's a viable option on this slate. With that said, guys, thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below, and have a nice day, guys.